Hey guys, guess what? This channel isn't dead yet, but I know it's been a while. I'm sorry about that, but I've been busy between school and like a lot of the shipments that I made, like the new welder, which I'll get into, and then like metal and some other tools, all took a long time to come in, but especially since I wasn't able to order them all at once, but um also, like the weather's been really bad, and I haven't been able to go out and just work. Just it's like 10 degrees. Like I can't really do anything in that. But a lot of progress has been made since the last time, and I'm finally ready to post this video. So let's get into it. So as I just said, about a week after the previous video, I ordered a new welder. This was the Welder Flux 135, which was $140 on Amazon. But this one was $50 more expensive than the previous welder that I had. But the main reason that I got this was for the flux core welding capabilities. So this one's able to do both flux and stick, so it gives me like freedom in whichever one I choose to use. But flux is a lot easier than stick. I bought myself a flux core wire spool from Menards and then just hooked it up into the Welder and then just tweaked with the settings before I thought it would be good to weld with. I grabbed myself a piece of scrap metal and grinded it down just so that I could weld on it. And then it was time for the first test of the new welder. Right off the bat, I had way more success with this flux core welder, and I think that the extra $50 was well worth it. But I was able to much better control my bead, and just everything looked a lot cleaner compared to the stick. I started out with the wire speed low and just let my hands kind of guide the wire into wherever it needed to go. So these were the results of the first time, and compared to the stick, these were a lot more consistent. Over here you can see a photo of like a pile of just flux that I made. I ordered 3 feet of 11 gauge square tubing with 1/8 inch wall size, and this was just to let me practice because this was what I would be using for majority of the frame. I just wanted to see how strong it was, like how I would weld with it, all that kind of stuff. And then over the next like month and a half, whenever the weather was nice or like greater than 25 degrees, I went out, cut a pieces off this square tube and just welded it together as you can see in these photos. Just clamped it together, and then one of the things I made was just this corner piece thing, which I welded and grinded down, and it looked pretty bad, but I saw a lot of potential in the joints and everything that I welded together. To help me plan the layout for the bottom side of the frame and help me visualize how it'll look in real life, I use these CAD measurements to just tape out just a visual representation with accurate angles and sizes. Just taped it to my garage floor. With all this planned out, I decided that I would be ready to start the frame itself. So I bought 30 feet of steel square tubing and just marked out where I would need to cut. I decided to do 45-degree angles for the corners, and I cut the tubing in a specific way so I could just bend it together when I was done cutting it. So this would just be less welding for me, and the whole thing would just stay together with more ease. Here was a piece that I cut out, and I was able to just bend the rest of the metal just right into place into that 90 degrees that I wanted it to. After doing this twice, I laid them out into a square and held them together using welding magnets that I also bought on Amazon. And the orange piece that you see at the bottom is a rafter square, which I used to measure the 45-degree angles and make whatever markings I need. And then finally, the last thing to do with this part of the frame was to just hold it all together. Before I actually welded like every joint together, it's best to tack weld it, which is just to put like a small spot or just tack like weld a point onto each joint. So this lets the entire thing stay together, but you can always just grind it away or just adjust later in the future before you do the full weld. So it just gives you that freedom. The order in which I'm welding is also really important. It's called weld sequencing, Obviously for tack it's not that big of a deal just because you're only putting a small amount of heat onto the metal itself, but when you're actually welding it's really important to follow that sequence in order to decrease warping. It's important to tack both sides of the weld, so off camera I flipped this over and welded just the other 4 corners. There was actually quite a bit of cutting that I had to do for just this basic frame. It turns out the angle grinder cutoff wheels aren't that long lasting. This is my third disc. There's solutions like the diamond disc, but I've heard those are slower, so I didn't want to try buying them. Here you can see one of the cuts that I made. I would highly recommend both the magnets and the rafter square. It really helps make the setup easier, especially for any 90-degree angles. But literally, you can do almost any sort of alignment and marking with those two tools, and it makes it a lot easier just to weld it afterwards. It's really important for everything to be square and just in the right spot, otherwise it's going to mess up the entire build later. I forgot with the first half of the frame, but it's really nice to have a test piece just to practice on right before welding on the actual thing. I didn't catch it on video, but as I was flipping it over to tack weld the bottom, the tacks weren't strong enough to support the frame itself and it ended up breaking. So I had to redo the entire thing just on the bottom side. So this time I was going to just put more flux core onto the tacks themselves just to and hope that it just holds. Especially on these two tacks at the bottom of this rectangle, there's a lot of stress at those points, so it's really important just to reinforce those. So I tried to put a little bit more flux onto it. When I flipped it over again to check if the tack welds held this time, everything held other than this one side piece which bent and fell apart. So here I am just retacking that into place, but after that's back and all the other tacks have been done, everything should just be in place. So as I'm wrapping up and just cleaning up shop, I do a little bit of cleaning of the frame with all of the tacks that I just did. There's still a lot of dust from the flux. One last thing I did was just make sure everything was flat because the tack shouldn't put that much heat on the frame enough to warp it, but just to check, I just pressed down in different spots and made sure everything was still flush with the garage floor. This is the fully tacked assembly of the frame, but it's not structurally sound yet, and in the next part of this series, I'll be welding up the entire thing and adding other parts to it, or like other components, just to add to the frame itself, maybe even make it three-dimensional. And then after that, I'll have to add the wheels and do more welding into the rear swing arm. Thanks for watching.